Welcome to Common Purpose, Uncommon Times. I'm Wes Smith, as always, proud to serve as your executive director. We've got a great lineup, some panelists tonight to help us with a lot of the questions we've had for weeks about meeting the needs of students with disabilities during reopening in this COVID pandemic. And so we've got some great folks that are going to share some really valuable information with you. But before we get to that, I wanted to start with a reflection tonight. I was really saddened to hear that we lost Representative John Lewis. I've had a chance to go with so many of you to DC and do advocacy trips. And I've met a lot of our leaders there, past and present. And I have never met a leader as gracious as Representative Lewis. We met him in the halls of the Capitol, and he was on his way to a meeting. And he asked us what we were doing. We told him we were educators, and he stopped. Nicole Anderson was there with us. I think Laura was on the trip. And he sat there and just talked about students and about the power we have as educators and how much he believes in education. And his handler was trying to get him to leave, to go to another meeting. And he kept telling the person, no, I want to keep talking to these folks. And he stayed there and he engaged us. He was humble. He was gracious. He gave us time when I knew he didn't have time to give, because he cared so much about public education. It made a huge impact on me. And I just wanted to give a shout out to him for everything that he stood for. And I want to say that I was grateful to have met him during my career. Last week was it was a busy end of the week. We heard the CDPH guidelines that were revised. The governor talked about reopening schools and the criteria for in-person instruction. By the way, we recorded a webinar last week. About 600 of you were on, so a lot of you heard it. If you haven't heard and you want to hear our GR team's take on the guidelines, what does it really mean? It's recorded. And so the team's going to put in the chat or the comment box the link to that, so that you can see that recorded video. And it suffices to say that we're thankful that the governor is listening, as we have been advocating for stricter guidelines around the health and safety issues, those guidelines that need to be established statewide by health experts, not educators. And then a call for more intensive instruction, real engagement, synchronous, daily, and he called for that. So we're grateful. There's still a lot of questions, some confusion out there, but we applaud him for trying to clarify, and we'll work with you to make better sense of that and to help you reopen safely. On that topic, tomorrow's guest on our ACSA campus tour is Superintendent Dave Gordon from the Sacramento County Office of Education, and I know he'll be talking about those guidelines and about how schools in his county are reopening, and the recent decision that they have made in the best interest of the health of their staff and students and community. But we'll let Dave tell you that tomorrow. Well, let me introduce our panelists tonight and get right into it, because we certainly won't have enough time to get to all the stuff we want to get to anyway. So enough of my stammering on. Tonight we have Maureen Burness, who's a special education consultant. I call her my special education guru. I don't know that she accepts me calling her that, but she is. She's always there for me. I appreciate her. We have Heather DiFede, Executive Director of East County SELPA, and a member of our council at ACSA, and so grateful for her for the work that she's doing. And then Kristin Wright, who is now the Executive Director of Equity and Early Intervention for the Sacramento County Office of Education. And Kristin is so well known on these topics. And people ask, well, why the equity piece? Well, because that's what we're talking about. We're talking about providing equitable learning opportunities for all students. And tonight we want to talk specifically about students with disabilities. And so welcome, panelists, and let's just jump right into the first question. Reading the tea leaves, it's really clear to see that legislators support proactive attempts to meet the educational needs of all students. So how are efforts like universal design for learning important for students with disabilities? And Kristin, why don't you start us off?
Hi, Wes. Can you hear me?
Yeah. Loud and clear.
Okay. All right. You were coming in fuzzy back there, so I just had to move. I'm sorry for everyone who had to watch me walk through my house, but these are these times that we're talking about here. Perfect timing. It's great to be here. So I believe the question was around why universal design for learning and why now? Why does it matter?
Absolutely.
So, I think most of us could agree that building great accessible learning from the build definitely allows for better access for our students with disabilities, as well as for many of our students who have trouble with access issues to their education. And it certainly makes the job of the special educator easier if they're co-planning and if they're coming in to support and work with their general ed counterparts for lessons that are already built, thinking about accessibility from the beginning so that special education can be truly special and that we're not having to reinvent the wheel around creating whole separate lessons. So I hope this time for distance learning, if nothing else, offers us the opportunity to think about, as we're building these new lessons, to really do that collaboratively and really think about using the tenets of universal design for learning to get those lessons started being accessible from the build so we can all do our best work.
That's great. Heather, SELPA perspective, same question. How do you see this as foundational from the build perspective? I love that, Kristin. That was great. But Heather, how do you see this fitting in?
And I think Kristin said it beautifully. As we're building our lessons, if we're taking the needs of all learners, including our students with disabilities, it sets a good foundation and provides for accessibility for a wide range of students and increases the engagement and looks at how we're assessing our students as well. And it's just kind of neat to think about if we can build this distance learning as we want education to be, when we do have the ability to safely return to schools, what can we take from this UDL principles that we're using for distance learning and apply them in the classroom once we return? And then thinking about what impact, that positive impact, we can build for our students with disabilities after this time.
Awesome. Thank you. Maureen, you're welcome to add on to that. I'll tee up the next question. And if you wanted to speak to the importance of all of us, co-creating, working together, the role of things like UDL in that regard, you're welcome to hit that as well. But the next question is, in this COVID reality, we know that staff need more support, not less support. We've got to provide ample support for folks as they engage things that are new to a lot of them, like distance learning. So how should administrators support staff who are working to meet the needs of students with disabilities?
So all of our comments, I think, are going to be about serving all kids. So this is going to apply here as well. So the issue that we talked about in our planning here was first trying to focus on students and what is it that they need. But in doing that, we recognize that for our teachers to be able to do that, we as administrators need to support them so that they can in fact do their job in a way that is socially, emotionally supportive and allows for that beginning for kids to be in a safe place. We all want to get to instruction. We all want our kids to learn. That's what we're all about. But if they're not in a safe enough place to actually learn, then we need to help provide that environment. So as administrators, our job needs to be that we are helping our teachers be as best prepared as possible. And then I thought about this as more since our last conversation and thought, and we need to make sure that we're taking care of ourselves here too, because for us to be the constant giver, it's just like being a mom. You give and you give and you give. And as an administrator, we need to now also be sure that we're taking care of ourselves in order to be able to provide that support to all of our teachers so that they can provide it to the kids. It's this big cycle of love that we need to be able to support for everybody.
No, that's so true. And Maureen, I think you've been on this Facebook Live with us before, or at least watched it, 'cause I've seen some of your comments, and it's one of the themes that we keep bringing up is leaders are selfless, and that's why they're leading, so many of them. All they think about is serving others, the adults and students in their care. But they can't make a difference if they can't show up, right? So we have to prioritize our own wellness. We have to be a bit selfish in that regard to prioritize and schedule it. So thank you for mentioning that as well. Kristin, you're at the county office level. And so, you know, the work that you're doing around equity, there are a lot of folks that need to be trained up and supported in that. Same question for you, you know, how should we be supporting our staff as administrators in this work?
So clearly, we are only as good as we're able to bring ourselves to the table. I know a lot of our teachers and administrators and educators have children of their own at home. So I think part of this is all of us having a deep understanding and compassion for each other during this time. I know as a parent, I have to, you know, there are worries that I have as a parent, and there are also things that we know as educators that we can and can't do in the same way that we did them before. And so I think we're all being tasked to think a little bit out of the box and have a little extra patience for each other. And you know, I'm a horrible preacher to this, but I do know that self-care and our own routines have been interrupted. I know that my, you know, late night binge watching is not conducive to waking up at 7 a.m. to try to start a full day. So I have to have conversations with myself about getting myself on a routine as much as I need my kids to be on a routine. And I think we have to continue to just not be too hard on ourselves. We're all trying to do what we can. But this is still, you know, I think we all thought that this was just going to be temporary. This has gone a little longer than we anticipated. So it's a little harder to be in denial about those things, about putting ourselves on routines and doing that self-care.
Yeah. No, thank you. And when we're off the broadcast, I'll have to ask you what you're binging, because I'm running out of things to
right.
binge myself. And it's funny too, because I have help in this regard, not the binging regard, but the keeping me focused regard. Because my wife will say to me, because I do a lot of these bits on work-life balance, and I mention this all the time on this broadcast, and she'll say, "Hey, do you ever listen to yourself?" Like, what do you mean? She goes, "Because you're not listening to yourself. You're telling everybody else to do it, and then you're staying up. You're on calls all night. You know, listen to yourself." So it's nice to have people who love you, who support you, because guilty as charged. Let's dive into some of the particulars. We've had a lot of questions last week. We want to really get into some of the specific questions that have come up. And Heather, we're going to start with this one. In these uncommon times, what are the requirements for IEPs for every student? So dive into that one for us, please.
That's a loaded topic. We have not received really any waivers to any of the rules and laws regarding special education. So IDA is still intact, and none of the waivers have been applied. So that leaves districts and the CDE in the position of following and enforcing the rules as they have written, which never were contemplating something like COVID. So it's very difficult. In addition, SB 98, the Education Trailer Bill, has called for each IEP to contemplate contingencies for emergency learning. And there are 4, I believe, different areas that we need to address in IEPs as they are held. And the intent of that is to make sure our parents are fully informed and aware of what's going on should we go back to distance learning, which many of us, like San Diego County, are on that watch list and will be in potentially opening the school year under distance learning. So we need to look to SB 98 and those requirements. As you're doing that and you're contemplating what you're going to be providing for students with disabilities and in having those conversations with parents, Perhaps another way to address that is through the learning continuity and attendance plans. And maybe there could be some room to incorporate more of a global perspective on our students with disabilities. I know there are still some questions on SB 98 and its implementation, but if you look at the crux of engaging with our families, maybe another avenue might be through that learning continuity and attendance plan. So no good answers and no easy answers. In our SELPA, we worked on prioritizing the IEPs and annuals that are due. We made a template that calculates the number of days overdue so that we can start prioritizing the students' IEPs and assessments that are coming up, and we can flag those that are most overdue and then work collaboratively with the families and keep track of our communications with families on making up those assessments and those IEP meetings.
Thank you for that. And another theme for our Common Purpose broadcast has been reframing this crisis into an opportunity to improve. And there's so many areas wherein we need improvement, and communication and outreach. Those are definitely areas. And so as we figure out how to do this differently, maybe more efficiently, and certainly more effectively, we'll be better because we've gone through this. And I think that's one of the themes I'm already hearing from the three of you is about inclusivity, about communication, kind of that all hands on deck mentality. Maureen, did either you or Kristin want to mention anything about the IEPs, SB 98 in particular, before we move on?
I definitely wanted to add a reinforcement to what Heather was saying about that communication, but by adding the fact that a simple phone call to parents is a big opportunity to open up that communication early without necessarily needing to have a 90-minute IEP for every kid the first week of school, because you can't. But what you can do is contact parents, welcome their child back in, let them know that you're there for them, let them know that you want to know what the child's big issues these days are, and have that communication on a much less formal way, but that makes sure that the families who are totally stressed about sending their kids to school or keeping them at home for school, whatever you're doing with them, that outreach to families just buys you a lot of goodwill, and we're going to need that as we go into this year. So I did want to reinforce that communication piece.
Great. Heather, I'm going to ask you another tough one. So, and no pressure, by the way, to any of the three of you. Only 225 people are watching tonight, which is our biggest viewership yet. So no pressure. Hardly anyone is paying attention. But Heather, you're at the ground level with the SELPA doing the work. You're seeing these different plans. The things that are coming up last week, they're coming up again this week. I'm hoping you can share some of the models or approaches you are either implementing or other SELPAs are for in-person, for distance learning. And a question that has come up several times, I think Carolyn mentioned it, and Eileen mentioned it. But what about our severely disabled students, meeting their needs? And I think one of the specific questions was, if they can't do distance learning, is it safe, or are there models to bringing them in person? So a big question. We'll let you start off sharing some of the models. And then Kristin and Maureen, I'd invite you to be thinking about models you've heard that maybe Heather doesn't mention, and we can share as much as we can with the folks listening about how this might look in their district. So go ahead, Heather.
And a shout out to Eileen from Region 18. But we just wanted, as we're looking across the state, there are going to be variances all over because of our local health departments, and even CDE's webinar today referenced working closely with your county public health so that you can come up with plans and potentially explore the waivers that were talked about today for elementary age students. And meeting our students with severe needs, there are a variety of programs that have been running in person because they worked collaboratively with their county public health, and then it was safe to do so. Marin County has been doing that program, I believe around May, June, And they have been very gracious in sharing all of their resources and holding meetings to discuss all the protocols that they used with their students with significant disabilities. So they have everything on their website. If you look on Marin County Office of Ed, it's Marin County SELPA that has really led that work in their area. Merced County SELPA also did a program, in-person ESY for their students with significant needs this summer as well. And they are in the process of sharing their information. We also have some of the state system of support with the SELPA content leads, the different SELPAs that have materials to help with accessibility for when we are in distance learning. So we have Placer County, which has their open access project that has a lot of resources for us to share. So there's no perfect answer. And as someone who's trying to write her reopening plan as well, I know there's no magic cure out there or magic template that we can hand out, but working collaboratively with your county public health will help. In San Diego County, I know we've done a lot of work getting groups together of teachers of moderate to severe programs and trying to work together collaboratively and share those resources and hold kind of like job-alike sharing opportunities as well, so that we can plan together. And it's an overwhelming task when you have to think of all the pieces that go with it. And so having more people in that planning process, back to what Maureen was saying, as administrators, including your teachers and different personnel in that planning.
No, and I really appreciate what you said too about working with county public health. The governor has been saying regularly, I mean, this is one of the constant, and consistent messages, is that we need to work with county public health and local stakeholders. And so I think that's really important, as you pointed out, that we work with our stakeholders, our labor allies, our parents, local public health, and local county offices. If we need to do something innovative or different, I believe the governor is going to support us so long as we're working in those collaborative efforts. Kristin, you wanted to say something about this topic as well. Go ahead and share maybe some of the examples you've heard of or know about.
Sure. I think one of the things I just wanted to say was really kind of going back to the equity conversation for our students with more significant disabilities is, I think we've seen a lot of innovations going on over the summer, and I think we'll see a lot more going into the fall. I know of a couple school systems and schools that have that did a really nice job including their students with more significant disabilities. And, part of it was based on the fact that the students had really robust accessibility already. And so I think one of the things we want to think about for our students with significant disabilities, and this just points it out even more, is that if we do have to continue to pivot back and forth between distance learning or hybrid, that we ensure that our students have communication and communicative competence and ways to access. I know of one school system that used like a separate iPad to have the instructional aid there on the iPad so that the student could see and hear that instructional aid that's typically with the student while they were interacting in the general ed classroom. So they were in an inclusive setting and basically an attempt to mimic what that classroom looked like. I know that's not always possible, but it is one innovation. And I just think, we have to be careful that we're not just bringing back all of our students with disabilities and segregating them and by themselves, and that really we use this as an opportunity. If they do need more one-to-one support, which we know our students with significant disabilities, a lot of their supports are people, and they require a lot of physical assistance, that we still allow them to push into their general ed classes. And so if everyone else is online and they're getting extra support at the school site, that those students would be tuning in with the rest of their peers and being assisted there, as opposed to having a completely separate system and separate program, and that we're kind of resegregating kids.
No, that's a great point. Thank you for that. And someone was asking a question as you were talking about the equity for these students. And so it was just perfect timing. Maureen, I know you have some resources we're going to share in a minute about social and emotional support. Did you have some resources for this area as well that we wanted Michael to put up there?
In fact, I did. That was one of the things that we talked about is starting with the big picture about needing to take care of everything, but then getting to the point where you actually have some specific resources. And so what I did try to send ahead of time is a pretty comprehensive list, although there's many, many more even out there. The couple that are on the Department of Education's website are the first that I had put on the list, and I wanted them to be noted because one of them is actually a compilation of a bunch of different people's input about all of the different kinds of resources out there for distance learning. And it's actually broken into topic areas like what do administrators particularly need to know, what do you need to do about behavioral and mental health. So there's multiple different links within that one link. And then there's also the guidelines just for reopening. There's also multiple, just since we had this conversation last Friday, I monitored how many things came over my email about resources for doing these things. And so there's that list of all of the different agencies that we all belong to, ACSA, of course, being one of them. But CSBA has resources. The Council for Exceptional Children has an incredible number of them, including one 3-part webinar on social emotional learning for kids with disabilities that they're just initiating now. Cal Matters tomorrow is having a special workshop on the issues about mental health in our schools these days. So that list of all of those different resources is available and is amazingly complete, with more things continuing to come out every day. Even vendors who are our partners in our conferences have really stepped up to the plate about offering teletherapies and professional development opportunities to help our teachers use different skill areas. So I was kind of anticipating that there would be a full list to be able to share. Maybe we can post that or something later, because I did send multiple different resources for people.
Yep, the team can put all of those into the comment section of the Facebook Live. So Gianna and Michael and the team, they're all out there. They can take those, put them in, so that people can see them when they come back and rewatch it. Or if they can't watch tonight, they come back and watch it. It'll be there. So thank you for all of those resources. Again, people come and they tune in. They get some real world examples of how it's working out there, what people are trying, a list of resources, and then, like me, inspired by the work that people like you are doing. So yeah, we'll put that in there. I want to. I think it was Dr. Moreno asked this, and this really leads into our next question. We know that the social emotional needs are great. The supports are necessary for our students and our adults. And so, Maureen, I'll start with you, but then let the others jump in. How are districts and counties effectively supporting the social emotional needs of students and adults?
So I think by making it be as overt as possible in terms of planning. I know everybody wants to get to instruction. I know parents want their kids to get back to school, but to be able to say, welcome back, let's look into our hearts and souls and take care of each other so that we can do this work, will be an important role for every administrator to do on site and at the district level as a first step, as a model to then what we expect our teachers to do for our kids, which is to say to the children, welcome back, let me give you a safe environment so that we can get back to our learning. So it's both that modeling and the resources. Professional development opportunities are out there, and those are growing in number every day, and we can use those.
No, Maureen, thank you. And again, look to the comment box there, folks, the chat box for these links and these great resources. Kristin, when we had this conversation last week, you had some great points about the social emotional needs that are there now for a variety of reasons, for a variety of things that are happening in our world right now that are certainly in this equity space. You wanna speak to that?
Sure. So, I think we'd all agree that there's so much going on in our world that our children are probably absorbing even more than they had before because they're home and we're all here hearing the same conversations together. And so, it's going to be more important than ever for adults and teachers and parents to feel supported in being able to have conversations and acknowledge that there's a lot happening from, over the summer and the last 3 months with the George Floyd killing and other things related to racial inequities and a lot of things on the hearts and minds of people of wanting to learn and do better. It's almost like, we need to be okay with acknowledging that to our students who probably felt that same pressure and tension both at home but we also know that our teachers and educators and administrators need support around those issues as well. I know at the county office level, we're doing work at all levels, kind of looking at those concentric circles, starting with us as individuals, and then how do we support our teams, and then how do we provide support to districts and families and our own schools within our county, and really trying to be proactive and not letting this be sort of like a one and done and we're moving on. This is something that from an equity perspective, we're going to have to address in the long haul. I've seen a lot of positive movement and commitment. It's just something we have to keep on with and not be afraid to continue to have those conversations, albeit, like in Sacramento County, we will be starting the school year online. And so we're going to still have to have those same conversations and make sure that we're supporting students. I know we're trying to, in Sacramento County, we've started a project to try to put a mental health clinician in all of our Sacramento County schools. We've just, in the process of hiring our first 11 for our 11 schools. Those folks are going to be important to support our teachers as much as to support our students and families.
No, Kristin, thank you for that. And folks, we know we're a little over time. If you can stick with us, we're going to answer one more question from the field. Heather, I'm going to kick this to you at your suggestion. And then we're going to do a rapid fire at the end. So if you can stick with us, please do. But Robin Jones asked, how will districts comply with the requirement of AB 1172 to visit MPS or RTCs who may not allow visitors due to safety COVID protocols? 2, how will districts conduct valid assessments during distance learning? So, Heather, how about that one?
So I know the answer we receive so many times when we go to trainings is it depends. And unfortunately, in this time, it's probably even more so because there's so many things we don't have hard and fast rules on, and it is frustrating. And as a person who's been frustrated by getting that answer, I feel you. For 1172 and having to visit an NPS, including our RTCs that may be out of state, prior to the placement of a student, we, the Self-Administrators Association of California, have been working with CDE to look at flexibilities and perhaps utilizing virtual visits to at least meet the intent of the law to do the best we can given these times. So we know, like for New York, we cannot as Californians travel to New York. So how can we do that? And we're working with CDE to come up with a way to be flexible during this time, but yet still ensure that our students have access to the services they need. So it's the best I can give right now. We are working on it, and I would explore some virtual visits. That's what we're doing with some of the RTCs to make our best effort in this time. Oh, the assessment question. We're having this conversation today. The assessments, each manufacturer of the different tests have different rules regarding the validity of their assessment. So we're looking at the manufacturing and publishers of the test to look at their criteria and perhaps make a grid of what the criteria is for each assessment. And we know as evaluators that not every student can be assessed virtually. There's some concerns about potential liability and requests for independent educational evaluations based on your assessment if you've done it under these non-standardized conditions. So really looking to the specific publishers and following their criteria. And then a district really needs to do a cost-benefit analysis. Is it better to do an online assessment with this particular student, knowing that given the liabilities, that may occur for a request down the road, but looking specifically to the publisher and any training opportunities and regulations they have are important.
Heather, I hope we're still friends after this. I keep giving you the tough questions.
Well, you and I will be. It'll be everybody out in the field that doesn't like my answers. I hope we'll still.
Nothing but love here. Hey, one of the things we like to do when we wrap up, we want to connect people, we want to inform, we want to support, but we want to provide hope as well, because we think that's important right now. This is challenging work under normal circumstances. Factor in everything we're dealing with now, and it can be really, really hard on folks. But I have hope. When I engaged the three of you last week and we just chatted, and hearing you tonight talk about working together, collaboration, starting with UDL, that's what it's about, right? Education for all, but then meeting the needs of those who have different needs, meeting the equity call. You give me hope, in other words. I'd like to know from the three of you, what gives you hope right now that we will answer the call, that we'll meet the day here in California? Maureen, let me start with you. What gives you hope?
Wow, family for me is absolutely the people who give me hope, because I get to see up close and personal the difference that everything that we do makes, whether it's for grandchildren or their friends. So I definitely think family is something that gives me hope, but also the opportunity that this challenge has created by making people be more creative and more thoughtful and thinking about different ways to do things, and then using that in their communication with their families and their staff, I think is another thing that truly gives me hope, because we have to do things differently, and we are. And people have come forward and been successful in ways that we didn't know we could be, and we are doing it. So that feels really hopeful to me.
Right on. Kristin, how about you? What gives you hope?
I think looking, I see it at home with my own kids, seeing the resilience, watching my younger daughter learn a lot about my older daughter, who has pretty significant disabilities, and really rising to the occasion around that. I'm not sure that those same opportunities would have been here had she been away at school, at college, and my other daughter not being here. I think this has given us some opportunity and some cause for pause. It's also helped me to sort of reevaluate what things were the most important things as part of a daily routine and program for her. And I think about the opportunity this is going to provide maybe us in the education system to stop doing the things that we had to stop doing, that we weren't sure why we were doing them in the first place. We've just always done them, and maybe embrace those things like UDL that have had a little bit of a slow start, and say, there are some things that we've been able to capitalize on that we may not have to the full degree, and letting go of some things that we thought we couldn't do, with some of the distance learning things that now we are able to do. And we've seen that across our society, not just in education.
Yeah, thank you. Heather, bring us home. What gives you hope?
I agree with family and the opportunities we've had to push ourselves and explore. But I think one of the things that gives me hope are all the concerns through the CDE conference call today and through this evening, is all the great questions that are coming up, even though we don't have answers. The great questions that people care so much about, making sure to have equitable access for our students with disabilities. These questions are coming from people who are caring about our students and who want to do the right thing by our students. And so I love the questions. Keep them coming. We will hopefully get answers sooner rather than later. But I'm excited about all the questions that continue to be raised about our students with disabilities.
Thank you. Well, Maureen, Heather, Kristin, thank you so much for caring about our members, the work that they're doing to take time out of your busy lives. Kristin has a new job, and she's taken time away from getting acclimated to helping our folks. And I just can't thank you enough. To all of you out there doing the work, thank you, thank you, thank you. Keep the faith, keep the hope. as we say, we're not just going to get through this. We're going to prevail. We're going to be better because of it. Stay safe. Be well. We'll see you next Monday night. Thanks, everybody.